Welcome in to another episode of the Casual GM podcast, where my co-host and I, Mike, just came off a pseudo argument about the LA Rams. So, Mike, how are you?
It's a fantastic day. I'm exhausted though. It's been a long several days. My son graduated. Here had his grad party on Sunday, so Saturday was housework and yard work and all that stuff, and the party on Sunday and all that stuff. So I'm finally getting back. I'm tired though.
Yeah.
What's up, Brian? What's up, Joey? Good to have you guys around. How about you, Drew?
I put in a time off request today at work for the end of the month because felt like I needed an additional long, like a 1 day additional long weekend. So yeah, I'm right there. I'm right there with you. So I get a 3-day weekend.
Mental health day.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So, but Mike,
Yes.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but nothing's happening in football right now.
Yeah, wait. News and notes around the NFL. What do we got here, Drew?
Virtually nothing. We could go really deep into it, I suppose, and Calvin Johnson was at Lions camp and like their relationships. We could do things like that, I suppose. I guess the news today that caught my attention was Stephon Diggs from the Bills appears to be really upset about something. I don't know what it could possibly be. The last we saw him, he was yelling at Josh Allen on the sidelines of their playoff loss, I believe, to Cincinnati. I don't remember who Buffalo played. He's getting paid like $24 million this upcoming season, and his contract is, I don't know that there's any contract in the NFL that's quote unquote untradeable. We just saw the Jets absorb $59 million of Aaron Rodgers' contract, so I don't think there's any contract that you just absolutely cannot move. But moving a 24, oh God. Well, this is, like we talk about Russell Wilson, like this will be the year, right? That if it's bad, it's going to be bad because you don't know how much longer you can commit to that.
But yet you kind of have to.
Right. Because you gave him just an unbelievable extension before anything he played a game for you. But if it's good, they have a chance, I think, to challenge for the division, which sounds crazy, right? Because they were so bad last year.
Yeah.
But we were just kind of talking about aberrant, unusual seasons and like how teams kind of like go all in or not on adding a player who may or may not bring a lot to that team overall. So
when you win some, you lose some. When you win it, it's a big boon to the team and you look like a genius. And then when it doesn't work out, you're like, I let a guy go for $24 million cap hit. And you're like, ouch, that hurts.
That does suck. I guess there is one topic I kind of wanted to talk about.
Okay.
In regards to the Lions for the news and notes section, and that is Chase Young. So Chase Young appears to be not in the long-term plans of the Washington Commanders. He had his 5th-year option declined. They just paid Jonathan Allen, or I'm sorry, Dwayne. I can't believe I can't remember. I'm so bad at stuff right now. Let me look up who they just paid. He was at Payne.
Jonathan Allen?
No, the other guy, his running buddy, Daron Payne.
Oh, yeah.
They just gave him a large contract, and apparently it looks like, I believe it's Montez Sweat is going to be up for a contract extension at the end of this season. And it looks like he's going to be the guy they're going to commit to. And that leaves Chase Young kind of out of the loop. So there's been some rumors, and apparently some media experts said that they thought Detroit would be the front runner to trade for Chase Young. And I read that, and I don't know that I've ever been like, okay, sure, yeah, right, more when it comes to a team, like a player and a team, than this potential pairing.
So are you a fan of the idea or not a fan of the idea?
I am not a fan of the idea.
And does it matter on what the trade compensation is?
Yes. So it always matters what the trade compensation is. So if they were like, hey, we will trade you Chase Young for a 7th round conditional draft pick. Yeah, okay, I'm going to make that trade because the upside's.
What about 2025 third?
If they traded, I would trade a 3rd round pick to speculate on Chase Young. Here's my problem with Chase Young. Do you really know who he is? 3 years in, he's been hurt. He's played declining number of snaps each season since his rookie season.
Mm-hmm.
He was great in college. Had a good rookie season. And if it continued to trend that way, I'd probably be pretty thrilled. I wanted to draft him in his draft year. That was the Okuda draft. And, Washington took him right before the Lions pick. So would I like to pair somebody up with someone like him with Aiden Hutchinson? Yeah. But there's no reason that I can see that James Houston can't be that player.
We've also got Romeo Okwara for a year.
Sure.
Right. He's got one more. I mean, we're kind of set at that. And if we do trade for him, we only get one more year anyway. We get this year.
And then you have to sign him to a long-term deal.
Right. And you can figure that out when it comes to, all right, what are we doing with Houston? What are we doing with Okwara? What are we doing with other Okwara? What are we doing with Pascal? Like, we have quite a few in that room right now, and they're pretty solid. It's not like they're scrubs. So I think adding him, you're making the decision then that one of those other guys isn't enough, and you're probably cutting them to make room, right? Because not only do you have to have cap space and the ability to do it, but you also have to have a roster spot for it.
Right. So if it was like if you had 2 years of him, maybe I would think differently. What is Joey doing? I don't understand this. Jalen
highest
Waddle.
EPA per target in college from wide receivers in the last 3 drafts.
I don't know who Du Bois is. Nathaniel Tank Dell, D. Smith, Devonta Smith,
Jackson Smith, Najigba, Antoine Green, and Jamar Chase. There was just half a second of static. Oh.
Well, we're having some weather here, so
this is true. It's bad weather. We have weather every day, but this weather just kind of sucks.
Yeah. Well, we need it. No. So, anyways, the thing about Chase Young is going to be what if it's a 1st round pick? I'm simply not interested. Right now, Washington would probably be remiss if they didn't get at least a 1st or a couple of mid-round picks back for Chase Young, just based on his draft status and college history. But do I think that Detroit's in a position to go all in on like a speculative rookie contract edge rusher? No. Also, I don't know that they've made a move like that in this regime's short history. Yeah. So, I think that it would be unusual for this regime to make a move like that.
Speculative trade as opposed to a free agent type of thing.
Remember, Brad Holmes comes from the Rams, the way that the Rams do things.
Mm-hmm.
And the Rams don't make speculative trades for rookies. They make trades for established NFL talent. And Chase Young,
you know what you're going to get.
Right. I don't believe that Chase Young fits that description.
Yeah.
So I would be hard pressed to say that he is really on their radar, unless it's something like 1 3rd round pick. Here you go. Take him off of our hands. Also, like what you said, I don't know that there's a clear number 2 edge rusher on this team.
Right.
But there's a lot of potential number 2s on the team. I don't think that any of those guys that we mentioned, Houston, Okwara, Pascal, Harris, whomever, would preclude the Lions from taking another edge rusher if one were there in the first or second round of this upcoming draft, but we don't know where they're picking.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a big speculative mess.
But speaking of trading first round picks, did you see the video of draft day when the Lions were trading and they apparently asked for this next year's first rounder from the Cardinals with their trade package? They obviously didn't end up getting it, but that would have been fucking awesome.
So I heard the rumor. So here's what I don't.
You haven't seen the video?
No.
Oh, there's video of it, and he's like, "Yeah, we're not doing it first."
Right. So here's my thing. You go from asking for their future one, right? Which it's either the Houston's or Arizona's pick.
Arizona.
Either one, great odds that you're going to get a super high top 5 pick.
Yeah.
And what you end up on is basically saying, hey, we asked you for a future one. Nah, it's cool. We'll take a 5th this year to move back. There is such a gap in those two things that it's almost insane. They must have wanted to move out so badly.
I think what it was not that, hey, we'll take your 12th and a 5th round pick for the number 6. I think instead of the 12th, we would have gotten, they're asking for next year's first and the 5th round pick this year. Instead of this year's first, I think we were asking for next year's first. So instead of going from 6 to 12 plus 5, it would have been 6 to next year's one. And they're like, we're going to be bad next year. We're not giving that up.
That would have been a great pickup. I would have been all about that.
I can't imagine it's anything else, because you're right. There's a huge difference between next year's first and this year's 5th, right?
Right.
So that's the only thing that makes sense to me, is that they were not taking 12. They were taking next year's first, this year's 5th, instead of 12 and 5. 12 and 5.
First of all, I'm happy that they asked.
Yeah.
Good. However, I am absolutely livid at where they ended up to move back from 6. I think that was the word is terrible. Like, the value that they got to move back was terrible. So,
and the worst part is there's been several comments and confirmations from Holmes that they would have taken Jahmyr Gibbs at 6. They were happy taking him at 6. And I don't know if that's we have to say that, because what else am I going to say? This is our guy, we picked him, and I'm not going to say anything else. Or if he was serious about taking him at 6. I'm hoping it's the former and not the latter. I think he'll be great, but Jesus Christ, at 6, he's going to end up being a top 10 paid running back by default.
I mean, I believe him now when he says I would have taken him at 6, and I think that doesn't fill me with any confidence. So anyways, it didn't happen, right? I don't want to go down that rabbit hole today. We've done that. But one thing we did want to talk about today is we wanted to take a look at what's going to happen with this salary cap a year, 2 year, 3 years out, right? So now we are into year 3 of the Brad Holmes front office, the Dan Campbell head coaching era. And they've hit on draft picks. They've hit on Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Aiden Hutchinson looks like a hit, and they found value up and down the draft, and including this year. So those guys are going to, his first draft class, Penei Sewell's 5th year options coming up this year. I think that's a no-brainer pickup.
Yeah.
But Penei Sewell is not the only decision that they have to make in this upcoming offseason. And this is a long time out, and we understand that. And there could be injuries or all-star or Pro Bowl performances from these group of players and what have you. But what we're trying to examine here today is, where should the Lions invest their money, right? What's going to keep them on this trajectory of we're a dangerous team. We have an opportunity to make noise in the NFC.
Because decisions we make today affect what our abilities, the ability we have to do things down the road, right? It's similar to the Saints. They're $61 million over next year's projected cap, which, by the way, is projected to be 25 million more than this year's cap, and they're still 61 million over. Those decisions that they made got them to the point where they're screwed. They're going to have to continue to shed salaries, shed players, and that's going to dramatically affect what they can do to build their team. And we need to make sure that, like, when we're doing things, and as we're doing the armchair GM stuff, like, well, if I was in charge, well, we got to make sure that we think about that. We don't want to hamstring us down the line and turn into the Saints.
Right. So the way that the Lions don't become the Saints, and there's no evidence that indicates that they treat their cap like the Saints do, is making well-informed decisions ahead of time, right? So it's not giving Alvin Kamara, a $15 million a year deal. Like Alvin Kamara is a nice player, but I don't want to commit $15 million to a running back. Brian says $83 million next year. Is that cap space, Brian? Is that what you're referencing?
The cap is fake. OTC has us.
Who said that?
69.
Is that Joey?
It was Joey. Over the cap has us at 65.5 million in cap space for 2024. I don't know if that is on the project, and that does not have, I don't think, the projected new cap number.
So here's what I'll say. Let's see. We are going into the 2023-24 season. When I click on over the cap on the 2024 season, which I look at to be next year's roster, the Lions have, quote unquote, 51 players under contract, but that includes void year players.
Yep.
So let me just see. You've got Okwara, Harris, Vaitai, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Mosley, Graham Glasgow, Marvin Jones has a void year. All of those guys will not be on the team. So that's 6 players. And then, that doesn't count. He'll be on the team. So, like, they have, what's 51 minus 6? 45. So they have the better part of a roster heading into next offseason. They don't have a ton of guys that it's like, well, we need to make up for, not having 20 players on the roster. They're going to have 8. They're going to have 10 guys that they're going to need to either fill spots for in the draft or in free agency. It's not going to be, I don't know that it's going to be a haul like it was this last offseason. And they could sign a lot of these other players that have void years to new money. But I think the Lions roster is in a good position that way. Like, I think the idea that they're constantly having to overturn the roster is coming to an end. We're starting to see the slowdown of roster turnover here.
No, it's about consistency and hole filling.
Right. So let's talk about some of the holes that we're going to see on the roster this year. So I made a list of players whose contracts who are either up and they're entering unrestricted free agency, or are probably in line for a contract extension after this upcoming season. So let's take a look at some of these guys. And anyone listening in the chat, let me know what you think about signing these players to another contract. Okay. So here's a list of new contracts that the Lions might have to sign in the offseason. Jared Goff. Okay. This is his last season on the roster. Jonah Jackson, starting left guard. His rookie deal is coming up. James Houston. We cut him, so he doesn't have a 4-year contract anymore. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Emmanuel Mosley. Romeo Okwara. Charles Harris. Vaitai, Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds, Jason Kabinda, Marvin Jones, Jerry Jacobs, and then they have to make a choice on Penei Sewell's 5th-year option. So, like, I think that they will probably they'll pick it up, but like, there's no way that he's gonna make it to the 5th year of his rookie deal. They'll extend him after year 4. So, just not feasible, right? So let me just do a quick count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 guys that are either starters or contributors, meaningful contributors. You know, maybe we could argue about Kabinda and Josh Reynolds and Jerry Jacobs, but 10 guys that I think you're going to have to make a decision on at the end of the season. So what do we do? So Mike, is there a position here from the guys that I've named that you want to start talking about?
I think we end on Goff, right? Because I think that is the linchpin of any successful team is a good quarterback. And one of the conversations I've had online is around re-signing Goff, and they're like, "Oh, well, like I don't want to pay $40 million for a mid-tier quarterback." It's like, "Oh, well, the cap's going to go up so much, and there'll be plenty of room. Not a big deal." And I'm like, "Well, that's true, but as that cap goes up, so does everybody else's salaries. It's not like it's going to be like, oh, we have all this extra money that we're not spending. No, they're going to be market setters." So the idea that in 2 years from now that we're going to have $50 million more per season to spend, it's no big deal to throw $40 million at a mediocre quarterback, I disagree with. So let's kind of talk about the people that get us to the point where it's actually a bigger decision than you think. The money's not always going to be there. So let's talk about our secondary. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Emmanuel Mosley being the two big ones that we got in free agency. And did you have Tracy Walker on there as well?
No, he has one more season after this upcoming one.
Okay. So let's talk Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Emmanuel Mosley. Sure. Gardner-Johnson is $4.5 million against our cap this year, $2 million next year. Mosley is $4.2 million this year and $1 million next year. Both of their second years are void years, just to reduce the cap hit.
So I don't know, to be honest, I don't know much about Emmanuel Mosley. I don't know that I've ever really watched him play. They targeted him in free agency. It was not a wave 3 signing. They had clear designs on adding this guy to the roster. So, and he was hurt. So I think that they said, I think it was two things. Recognize the talent. They could get him cheaper because he was injured, which Holmes has done, whether that's in free agency or the draft. Like, he doesn't have problems bringing on injured players, right? He's willing to bet on them recovering and being the player that they were.
I broke my toe once. That doesn't mean I'm going to do it tomorrow.
Right.
I've been good ever since then, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, at least with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, there's enough there that I'm aware of. He used to play in New Orleans, where Aaron Glenn was a coach. Aaron Glenn has told Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, per reports, that he's going to use him in a very similar way that he was used in New Orleans. Okay, so all that means is Chauncey Gardner-Johnson knows what to expect and is playing in a system that he knows with coaches that he knows. Just the location is different. So, like, to me, you can give this guy $8 or $9 million a year over 3 years. You know, $20, $24, $27 million contract after this upcoming one, and it's a deal. Like, it's a good deal. Like, I think he's better than Tracy Walker, even though Tracy Walker played well before he got hurt last season, and looks like he's on his way back. But this guy could be your slot corner. You know, there's redundancy there with Brian Branch and having picked him up in the third round.
You got a mentor.
Second round.
Second round. Yeah, he was the only second rounder that actually stayed to go out on stage. Everybody else that dropped to the second round
went home
with their tail between their legs. He's like, no, this is the only time I'm gonna ever be able to do this. I'm gonna live this thing up.
Good. That's good.
I loved it. Yeah, that was great.
I was thrilled that they picked him. So now there's a
I would have been happy with picking him at 17, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%.
But it's even better picking him in the second.
Yeah, exactly. So my thing is, I don't think Tracy Walker prevents you from re-signing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I would prefer that they re-sign Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to something closer to what he probably wanted this offseason and didn't get, and then cut Tracy if you need to if you need to free up a starting spot next to Kirby, because Tracy Walker's contract is like $3 million heading into the 2024 season. So
yeah, he would save us $5.5 million in cap savings if we do a pre-June cut.
They restructured his deal. Okay, since the last time I saw it. But you have three safeties on the roster: Joseph, Walker, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. And so if you put Chauncey in the slot, now you don't have a spot to play Brian Branch. So you can put Brian Branch is a second round pick. Like, it's not like he's supposed to play tomorrow. But like, I would imagine that they envision their starting safety group as Joseph, Branch, maybe Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. And if 2 years now Walker plays out his deal and leaves, and like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson tests free agency again, you have Branch there as backup, right? The problem that I think that the Lions have is cornerback. They have Cam Sutton under contract long term, for what that matters anymore. But I think he's got basically a 3-year deal with 2 void years on afterwards, something like that.
Let's see. 3-year deal with 2 void years.
So this is the year that he's cheap.
Wealth of knowledge.
Yep. So he's going to be on the team. Like, this is the longest tenured defensive back on the roster. Him and Kirby Joseph are going to be, their contracts run out at the same time. So Jerry Jacobs is up at the end of the season. Mosley is up after the end of the season. And like, who else is a cornerback on this roster? Will Harris? Ugh. I mean, like, I like the moves that they made in free agency, and I think that the secondary is much better than it was last year, but it's still thin. Walker's still hurt. Mosley's still coming back from injury. I mean, there's a very real chance that the starting lineup for the secondary heading into the next game 1 of this season is Sutton, Jacobs, Branch, Joseph, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in some configuration, because that's who's not hurt. So,
or at least not returning from injury and not full strength.
Tracy Walker is adamant that he's going to be back, but I mean, like, every player says they're going to be back. The thing that Joey just said, like, I'd hang out with Jerry Jacobs for that reason. Jerry Jacobs has never made $1 million in a season, not once. So, like, if you could probably re-sign Jerry Jacobs $3 million, $4 million a year, 3-4 year contract, and he'll be way at the bottom.
Oh,
I thought no.
This is for 2024. He's probably
he's not on the roster. Yeah.
There he is. $941,000.
Yeah, that's the most he's ever made. That's big money for him. So
it's big money for me. I've never made that.
I would love to make that much money. I would be fucking swimming in it. So I would Scrooge,
right?
I would Scrooge McDuck it. I tell you what. So
give it to me in pennies.
I would swim through it in a huge tower, but or a wading pool. I don't care which. But like, the point is, I think that the secondary is extremely thin, and so how do you address it? Like, that was one of the things I wanted them to do in the draft this season. They didn't. So they're going to pick
addressed it in free agency, but it was
short-term address. Yeah. And so this is something that we have seen this front office do is like they take a position group, they attack that position group, and they do something. They turn the position group over. And then in the subsequent years, their focus shifts to, okay, which player of this group that we turned over came to the top, rose to the cream rises to the top of whatever that saying is. That's the player we're investing in. Now we will go out and continue to add to that secondary, to that next spot until we built the unit to our satisfaction. Right. So I think that you've seen this on the defensive line, right?
Yep.
You add
Band-aid it until it can heal.
Right. You add Aiden, you've still got Okwara, Harris, you draft Pascal, you've got James Houston that makes it a splash. And now we're going to see okay, you've got one thing locked out in Aiden Hutchinson. Now who's going to rise to that secondary role, or do you need to go out and address that as well? But I think that all of those positions that we have talked about, that's kind of low money stuff. We spent the most of all those guys on Cam Sutton, and he's going to be a $10 million player next season, 2025. So we're the 2024 season, right? So the upcoming season is 2023. I'm getting ahead of myself. But let's talk about a big money player. And the player that I think is going to demand big money this upcoming offseason is Jonah Jackson. He is a 3-year starter. He was a 3rd-round pick from Ohio State. He's played well. And he was a Pro Bowl alternate.
Yep.
So his agent's going to say that he made the Pro Bowl. And I think that he's going to ask for what amounts to top 10, top 5 guard money.
Yeah, knowing that others are going to end up with more than him anyway. That's just the way that the market works, right? Right. You don't have to be the number one person to reset the market because the number one person isn't going to it might not be their year, but it will be eventually. So I might not be the 5th best, but of the ones that are re-signing and extending, I'm up there. So pay me now.
Right. So my problem with that is if you have a top 5 guard money on the roster, I think that you're eating into a spot that you could otherwise have spent that money on that's more valuable. So
go ahead.
So if you resign, I think Jonah Jackson's a good player. I just don't think that he is the quality of player that you give top 5 money to at that position.
And good God, damn it. Go away. So what we're looking at then, if you're looking at top 5 guard money, you're looking at 13 to 16 million bucks.
Yeah, let's say 15 million a year. So let's say he signed a 4-year, $15 million a year contract.
Let's note that is almost triple what he's made in his career so far, cumulative.
Right.
He's a $3 million player this year.
Exactly. So opportunity cost. Joey's ringing the bell.
And this is why people are like, well, there's going to be so much money in our cap in 2 years that we can throw $40 million or $45 million at a mediocre quarterback because it doesn't matter. Well, it does, because you're going to have a guard that's going to have a 4 times increase in their salary because he's worth it. And that's going to eat up that extra money really, really quick.
Right. And you got to remember, Decker's contract goes up. Ragnow's contract goes up, not by tons, but they increase, So if you if you give the Lions already have maybe the most expensive offensive line in football, right? Like it's close. But like if you pay Jonah Jackson, you are going to have to pay Penei Sewell the next season. And Penei Sewell is going to get top 5 right tackle money.
He may reset the market depending on if he or Rashawn Slater signs first.
Well,
whoever signs first is gonna. Is it Slater?
He's gonna get left tackle. I mean, it's almost exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
He's gonna get left. He plays left tackle, so yeah, he's gonna.
Yeah, but that might be what Sewell gets though. They may move him at that point to left tackle because at that point it might be toward the end of Decker's career. They may trade him. They may cut him for cap reasons and move Sewell off to the left. But even if not, we're looking at, I would say he's going to be a top 3. Right. I mean, he's already considered a top 3 tackle on the right side. So he's going to be making $20 million a year.
I don't see, outside of Lane Johnson, I don't know that there is a right tackle on that list that you could say could demand as much money as Penei Sewell. So let's say Penei Sewell signs for this is what, 2 years from now, $22 million. So think about this. Let's say you keep Decker, right? At that point, this would be what your offensive line looks like. You are paying Decker $20 million a year, Jonah Jackson 15, Frank Radnow 16 or 17. We don't know who the right guard is, and you're paying Penei Sewell $22 million a year. That is something like $75 million.
In 2 years, Decker's cap hit's only $3.9 million.
Yeah, that's his void year because he won't be on the roster. So
right. So next year, 2024, he'll be $19 million.
Right. So you've got 19, 17, 15. What's that? 36 plus 15 is 51 for 3 players.
You got Ragnow at 13.
Yeah.
That's 67. And then we're going to find some guard on the right. Maybe we keep Vaitai. I doubt it. He's getting toward the end of his career, I think, on the age side.
Graham Glasgow's contract will also be up after this season. They signed him to a 1-year deal with a void year after it, I believe. So, like, there's also depth concerns to consider. Remember, he's the replacement for Evan
Neal.
Thank you. Who went to Seattle?
Was it Neal?
Not Evan Neal. That was
Evan Brown.
Evan Brown. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, Evan Neal was actually a good player.
Yeah, he got drafted.
He was a top 10 draft pick, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was last year.
I was gonna say, yeah.
So, so like, where do you put your money? So, like, as we have discussed now numerous times, guard is a position that not only makes it to the free agent market, but that you can draft in the mid to late rounds. That's how you ended up with Jonah Jackson, right? And Jonah Jackson was a pick from the last regime, right? He's not a Brad Holmes pick. But what do you do? Do you want to spend 15 potentially $1 million a year on Jonah Jackson and keep some kind of continuity on the line? But like, to me, if that's the signing, don't you have to do something with Decker the next season?
Either replace him or extend him?
I would think you would have to replace him. So, like, I would think that something like 2024, and remember, tackles don't usually make it to the open market. So you're talking about drafting
good tackles. Good tackles.
Right.
There's a lot of bad tackles out there.
Right. So like, we saw the Chiefs sign Juwan Taylor, I believe, to $20 million a year because he got to the open market. Like Orlando Pace got 16 or 17 on the open market, right? So it's not like they never move, but like, you're not Laramie Tunstall, Trent Williams are not making it to the open market,
Right.
So to me, I mean, Taylor Decker is a good player on a cost-effective contract. Like, I don't really have a problem with Taylor Decker's play or his number, but like, I also wouldn't be surprised if this time next year they had traded him for draft picks.
Yeah, I can see that.
If
It may be a team like the Rams that need offensive line help, or the Bears. I don't think they're going to trade to the Bears. It takes a lot to trade within the division, but the Cardinals could use some offensive line help. Like there's teams out there that have quality people that just need a boost in different areas on the line. I could see that for sure.
Exactly. And like if it's not those teams right now, it's the other half of the NFL in a couple of years, because there's always a need for quality tackle play. There's never enough tackles. So,
in fact, you could probably take this list and start scrolling down, and because these guys have their left tackles, right? They're paying 16 to 25 million, but once you start looking at, all right, well, the Steelers, Broderick Jones, it's just maybe.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. He's gonna be on a rookie contract, but so that's a bad one. But like some of these other guys that Rashawn Slater's on his rookie contract, Darrisaw's on his rookie contract. But Jonah Williams for the Bengals, is he a rookie?
No,
he's UFA.
He demanded a trade because they signed Orlando Pace, and they're going to play him at left, and he doesn't want to play right. And so he's now rescinded his trade offer, but he's likely to make it to unrestricted free agency, which means I think he's going to get tagged, because once again, the franchise tag for tackles incorporates the contracts for guards and centers, which drags the tackle price down.
Yeah.
So the non-exclusive franchise tag for tackles is always going to be $2 or $3 or $4 million less than what the top 5-10 tackles on the market do, and that's a deal. Or you're appropriately pricing the player and they don't have a say in it. So it's an absolute, I mean, like that's why you see running backs, tight ends, safeties, tackles, and quarterbacks get the tags, is because 3 of those are the least expensive tags that you could possibly have. And the other 2 are 2 of the most important positions in the NFL. And it's a deal because they can't argue with it. The best they can do is sit out. So it's a deal for the most expensive ones, and it's a deal for the cheapest ones because just straight money.
Yeah. And even just looking at the ages, Decker's 30, right? Dwayne Brown for the Jets, he's their starting left tackle. He's 38.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be an upgrade there, both on the play, because I think Decker was actually better than him, but also you get somebody with some more years left in them. So there's definitely places where I think that we can make some trades. But he is one of the older ones. And when you start scrolling through, you got Tyron Smith at 33, but then you're scrolling way down into like James Hurst, Cornelius Lucas at 32. Most of these guys are younger than he is. So that's the other place that you tend to see teams making moves is I've got a guy that's aging out. Andrew Whitworth, that he's like, I'm retiring. And then I need someone to fill in the spot. But when you're also toward the later end or the end of your prime or whatever, it's harder to find trade partners. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
Exactly. So when I look at like the upcoming draft, what I see is if the Lions are picking in the 20s, they're looking at something like taking the 4th or 5th tackle off the board, assuming they all declare, which is not a guarantee. And you're probably putting that dude on the right side, right?
Yeah,
which means that you're.
Well, then the question is, are they actually taking a tackle, or are they going to take an edge or corner, right?
So that's the reason. That's another reason why I wasn't in love with this draft class, is that like those questions that you just asked are not answered yet.
Yeah.
So because now that you took a draft class that is largely tight end, safety, and running back based in your premium picks, you are Oh, and linebacker. My apologies to Campbell. But what you're saying is you have not addressed some of this depth concerns or the next guy up mentality when it comes to your roster 12 months removed from this draft class. Now, I have a hard time believing that the Lions front office didn't look at, like, okay, these are the contracts that we have coming up. We might want to consider, like, if the opportunity is there, to take a guy that might fill in for an Taylor. I'm sorry, I keep calling him Eric Decker. Taylor Decker. Or this could be Mosley's replacement or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But instead, they chose to overhaul the running back position, add another tight end.
They didn't overhaul it. They just incrementally improved the running back. They just got David Montgomery. Adding Jahmyr Gibbs is not an overhaul.
Well, they had what I mean is they had 2 starting caliber running backs on the roster, and now there are 2 different starting caliber running backs on the roster.
I thought you were talking about strictly on the in the draft, but you're also talking free agency. Gotcha.
Right. So, like, you want to commit to it in free agency? Sure, fine. David Montgomery is a nice player, but to me, it just doesn't make any sense. You know, when you have this coming up, like, I would have thought something like guard depth, backup center would be something that we saw addressed in this last draft class. But, like, you can still find those players in free agency. So, corner, tackle, we have big position groups coming up. Quarterback, which we haven't talked about yet. We have those things coming up very soon that you'll have to address. Otherwise, you know, the roster starts to degrade.
Well, then let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Sure.
JG. Jared Goff. He is this year $31 million against the cap. Next year, $32 million against the cap. If we were to cut him, it would only be $5 million in dead cap money, and it would be almost a $27 million savings. That really comes down to, is Hooker the guy? Like, what are they seeing in Hooker this year? You know, did Jared Goff get hurt and then Hooker came in and lit it up, or did Jared Goff regress? Like, so, I think this is going to be a year where Jared Goff will either prove that he's the guy going forward, and we're going to extend him probably 3-4 years, or he's going to be inconsistent enough, average enough to not garner that and then hit the open market. And maybe we extend him 1 year or something like that, but I don't think he's going to get a really big one. It's either going to be a long-term, you're our guy, or good luck in the future. Maybe we'll keep you for a year or try to do a 1-year deal or something like that. But this is his prove it year.
There's nothing that he can do, in my opinion, that warrants a second big time contract with the Lions. There's nothing.
If he plays the entire season like he played the last 6 games,
no.
5 of his last 6 games were all graded in the high 70s and low 80s.
No.
He was smart with the ball. I think, but the problem is he's not consistent enough. That's been one of his problems throughout his career. But if he can play that level, if he's going to be in the high 70s to 80s every single game, what more can you ask for? Especially if he's going to reduce the mistakes that he did.
What more can I ask for?
I mean, like, he's going to be a top 10 PFF, top 8 PFF if he is in the 70s and 80s every game.
I don't care. He is not a good enough player to beat other elite level quarterbacks in this league. End of story. End of sentence. No,
that's what he'll have to prove.
Right? He has never done it. He has never done it. He is going into his 8th season. He has never done it.
He had one really, really good year in 2018.
Yep, he sure did, and lost in the Super Bowl to a better quarterback, and that has been the fucking MO of Jared Goff his whole career. Let's go back to Thanksgiving. I mean, like,
well, I mean, he beat the snot. Well, he didn't beat the snot out of him, but he beat Mahomes in that big, was it 54-52 like offensive blowout? He was the victor in that. And when I say he, I mean
who do you
want
to have on your team, Patrick Mahomes or Jared Goff? Then
I'm just saying that, like, if he is consistently good, I think that's, if we can build a team, I think that's good enough.
No,
I don't think he's going to be that way. So don't get me wrong. Like, I don't think that he's going to meet the expectations that I set for that. But that's, I think if he did, if of the 17 games, like 14 of them, 13, 14 of them are in the 80s, a couple in the 90s, mostly, 70s, 80s, 90s, he's probably done enough to beat most of those teams. And he's taken us some places. He's going to have to show me that. I don't think it's going to happen. He's got to prove that it can happen.
What you just described is not good enough for this team to make consistent deep playoff runs or to win a Super Bowl. It just isn't.
I don't know.
Okay, when was the last time that happened?
For us?
No, for anybody.
I guess I'm not sure what you mean.
Okay, can you get the over the cap stuff out of here?
Yeah.
When was the last time? Just have it be. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
When was the last time that somebody was like, I'm just a steady, average, game managing quarterback that's not considered to be the greatest quarterback of all time? Where that just worked out.
Are you saying Tom Brady's just a game manager?
Well, I mean, is he not the greatest game manager ever? What does he do that's special beyond that, right?
He had an arm, he had accuracy, and he had good decision making. But yeah, you're right. He is
right.
That was very much what he was.
Tom Brady, Peyton Manning were the quintessential walk up to the line, know what you're doing, beat you, like take what you give them, march down the field in 14, 15, 16 plays, and efficiently score enough touchdowns to beat you. Right? Like, that's not what the NFL is anymore. That's not what Joe Burrow is. That's not what Josh Allen is. That's not what Patrick Mahomes are. They can do those things. But the point is that they can do other things beyond that, and that's what Jared Goff can't do. Jared Goff's the best version of Jared Goff, the absolute best version of Jared Goff is, I am the 8th best quarterback in the NFL, and I am an elite game manager who doesn't turn the ball over. But he does nothing beyond that. That is his absolute ceiling. And you cannot, this is the problem Buffalo's having right now. They cannot get past the Chiefs, and they have arguably the 2nd or 3rd best quarterback in the entire NFL, who's the 2nd leading rusher from the quarterback position, who has an absolute cannon for an arm, who went from having 2 terrible rookie seasons to like the next 3 being elite 90 level seasons. Like, there's nothing more that you could really ask Josh Allen to do except beat the Chiefs. Like, the biggest problem that Josh Allen has is that he lives and plays in the NFL when Patrick Mahomes does. Like, that's just not fair. Like,
it's the Wayne Gretzky thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, can you imagine? Like, Mark Messier played during Wayne Gretzky, right?
Yeah, I mean, he ended up in the Hall of Fame and won. Honestly, I think Gretzky made Messier better.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
So, how much better would people think of Mark Messier if Wayne Gretzky had never played? Right? His bar would be the bar, or something like that. The problem that Josh Allen has is that he's got another.
They were on the same team, which is the other thing. Like, they played together. It's really like,
oh, they did?
What? Yeah.
I thought
they won like 3 cups.
Rangers.
In '94, he left for the Rangers and won the cup in '94. But he played the Edmonton Oiler heyday was Messier, Gretzky, Yari Curry, Glenn Anderson, Paul Coffey. Those guys, they played together. The real question is, like, how many scoring titles would a guy like Mario Lemieux have done?
Oh, sure.
Like, of the top 10 scoring seasons of all time, 8 of them are Wayne Gretzky. The other 2 are Mario. Like if Gretzky wasn't there, holy shit, it's like Mario Lemieux and like Yager
He might have
and
10.
some of those guys, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, so I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's why there's nothing that Jared Goff can do, in my opinion. Even if he wins a Super Bowl, you should move on from Jared Goff, because what the best asset that you could possibly have in the NFL is a quarterback that you hit on who is on a rookie contract. And so you got to give Hendon Hooker a chance. You got to give Hendon Hooker.
Even
you
if
got
he
to give
takes
Hendon
us
Hooker
there and wins the Super Bowl, he's not good enough.
He is not good enough. I know it sounds insane, right?
It is insane because he literally is good enough to get to win the Super Bowl in the scenario.
Yeah, but like the thing of it is, like, I have not seen Jared Goff defeat a superior level opposing quarterback.
So
I just
Brian
haven't seen it.
Drew, would your opinion change if Goff beat Mahomes in the first game of the season?
No. So here's the thing, right? So this is a great question that Brian asked. Here's my response. Any individual game, any quarterback could win it, right? So like, I'm with you on that. Like, but like, does a one game sample size mean that you want to commit to this guy for the next 3 years? I sure hope not. And when I look at like their resumes, Jared Goff got to a Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes, 1, 2, been to 3, 2-time MVP, whatever else you want to put on that list, right? One of these guys pushes his team forward. That's Patrick Mahomes. One of these guys, you have to build around the team to drive him forward. And that's Jared Goff.
Yeah.
And so
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you can't, if you're not a driver, then you might as well have
a passenger.
Right. You might as well have a quarterback on a rookie deal so that you can continue to build the team. Because, I mean, I think that it's too much for Jared Goff right now. And you want to, I mean, like if people are talking about giving him like $10 or $12 million more on top of it, you know, there goes Chauncey Gardner-Johnson.
He's not taking less than Daniel Jones.
I mean, right? So, I mean, like, do you want to re-sign Jonah Jackson? You can't re-sign Jared Goff for that much money.
Right.
Yeah, so Brian says he would also want a larger sample size. And that's my point, right? So, like, Brian gets it. Like, it's very clear. Like, if I think the Lions have a better roster outside of the quarterback position than the Kansas City Chiefs, I think you could have that debate. They had a top 5 offense. They had the number 1 special teams in the NFL last year. I don't know that, but the difference that the Kansas City Chiefs have over every other team in the NFL is that they have Patrick Mahomes. And the search for the quarterback.
A little bit fair. We have to be fair in that you can't always compare against possibly one of the greatest of all time, right?
But you have to be able to close the gap.
Sure, but like it, I would see that in other sports as well, where you're like, oh well, Chris Osgood, yeah, sure, he won 405 games and 3 Stanley Cups and William Jennings Trophy as lowest goals against average for a team, but he wasn't as good as Dominic Hasek or Martin Bertour. Like, those are like 2 of the 5 best of all time. Let's be fair here about some comparisons.
Sure.
And so, like,
but after Chris Osgood, didn't the Red Wings go out and try and sign Dominic Hasek?
Yes,
right.
We signed him in 2002, but then you know what? Osgood in 2008 actually replaced Hasek. They pulled Hasek and put Osgood in, and he took us to victory.
Sure. So I mean, yeah, I mean, like, not quite exactly the same thing, right? But like, I take your point. The difference between Jared Goff and Patrick Mahomes is great enough, in my opinion, that you have to continue to look for ways to close the gap in that particular talent set.
Yeah, I just think that as we have to be realistic about, like, is Hendon Hooker going to be better than Patrick Mahomes?
No, but he costs significantly less than Goff, which lets you to continue to close the gap in other areas. So, like, what's the argument? So the argument is Jared Goff randomly has, and it is random, mind you, the best season that he has had as a pro You get however far into the playoffs this season. You then pay him more to continue to be your quarterback, which detracts from your ability to build the roster around him. Correct?
Sure. Yep.
Sure. Okay.
Same. Joe Burrow, same way though, right? You're going to pay him, and it's going to detract from building around.
Right. That's why their Super Bowl window is right now.
Are you talking about the Bengals or us?
The Bengals. Because you cannot pay Higgins, Chase, and Burrow and then continue to build the team. Your draft space, your cap space is going to take an unbelievable hit.
Yep.
Now, you might still be really good for the next 4 or 5 years while those guys are on second contracts, but then the drafting becomes so much more valuable because you need to be able to continue. The only other way to improve the team around those core players is to draft well, because you don't have the money to compete in the free agency market.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Right. So that's my point. Like, what do you do to continue to make the team better? And paying Jared Goff is not that.
Yeah, I think we have to have some realistic expectations about like what we're actually trying to find. We if the threshold is I need someone that's going to be as good as or really close to as good as Patrick Mahomes, you're just not going to find them. I mean, the dude's a generational talent.
Then you're not looking at winning in while he's playing in the NFL.
You have to do your best, right? But you can't be like, well, if he's not him, we got to keep looking, because you know who else is not him? Lamar Jackson.
Right.
Jalen Hurts. Josh Allen isn't him either, right? So
Sure.
like, well, if we got Josh Allen, he's not as good as Mahomes. We need to keep looking for somebody better. No, like you don't. You still have to you just want a top guy.
Right.
And I think that is Goff? You know me. That is not what I think.
Right.
But at the same time, Holmes made a very smart comment when he said it's a lot easier to get worse than it is better, right?
That's every position, every single decision.
It is. But my point is, and his point is, if you do it, you need to go big or go home. You need to know that you're going to get something bigger and better.
I don't think that you do. The thing that what you just said right now is you can't just keep looking. You have to keep looking. You have to keep looking, because otherwise you're just going to be stuck as a tier 2 NFL team that's hoping that an injury allows you to go and get past the tier 1 NFL teams out there. And I know how you feel about Jared Goff, but you can't also sit there and say you wouldn't rather have Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and Josh Allen as the quarterback of the Detroit Lions.
I've never been a Lamar Jackson fan, so I don't want him. But the other guys, I would take on my team.
What is the difference between Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson?
I'm not a big Hurts fan either. He needs to do more than one season, right?
Sure.
So that's. He got thrown a big pile of money, and that's great because he had one really good season. Let's see if he can keep it up. I hope he does, because he's an exciting guy to watch. But we'll see if he's a Cam Newton where he just has a year, maybe 2, and fizzles out.
So you're not a fan of giving a big money contract to a quarterback that has one really good season? So Jared Goff?
I'm not a fan of Jared Goff, and I'm not a fan of giving him the bag.
Exactly. So what I
would do is if he comes out and plays at a top 8-ish PFF type of season, where he's consistently in the mid to upper 70s, 80s, hits a couple 90 games. If the dude comes in and wins 15 of 17 games and takes us to the Super Bowl but still loses, I would roll with him. Give him another year.
The Rams
keep
did
building the team. Well, that's because he regressed the next 2 years. They did actually give him a big contract.
That's right. And then before they gave him a dime of that new money contract.
But that's why I would give him a 1-year extension. All right, you showed that you're no longer regressing, you're progressing. Do it again. And then if we have 2 seasons in a row where we're going 15-2 and he's playing in the 70s and 80s and he's doing the Tom Brady ultimate game manager thing, Tom Brady won a shit ton of Super Bowls being a fucking awesome game manager.
Remember
I
what
would
you
love
just
to
said
have
to me
a
about
fucking
like
awesome game
careful.
manager.
Remember what you just said to me about like comparing people to generational talents.
I understand that.
Sure, right.
I'm just,
so like,
but that was my point. Is like he was a game manager. He was very good at that.
right.
I would take a very good game manager if he's going to win 15 games a season and get us there, right?
There, if you can win 15 games, the roster outside of a game managing quarterback, then you can win 17 with a quarterback that can win outside of structure.
Sure.
So you cannot stop. Teams that make that commitment lose games. Look where the Vikings are. Like, take quarterbacks that play like Jared Goff and look where those teams have been as far as winning deep into the playoffs. And the team, like, those teams end up in the following pattern. Hey, we got better. Hey, we're kind of a playoff team, and maybe we'll get into the playoffs and win a game. Oh, okay. We have to maintain this level of play. Therefore, we have to pay our quarterback in order to stay at that level because they have the largest impact of any position in the roster. So they're going to be able to leverage that contract from the team. That's what Kirk Cousins has done for like the last 4 or 5 years. But I mean, when was the last time the Minnesota Vikings won a championship? Like, that's my point, is that like the type of play that Jared Goff exemplifies does not win in the current NFL. He is the last old guard that will end up being filtered out of the NFL at this position. You cannot commit any more money to this player. Not a 1-year deal, nothing. You cannot commit more money to this player. Anything else, and you are just simply dragging out and losing time that the rest of the roster could be playing with a better quarterback. Even if
you can find a proven better quarterback, cool.
I don't know that that's necessarily true. If Hendon Hooker takes over and is a downgrade from Jared Goff, PFF grade, overall quality of tape that you watch or what have you, and the money that you save, the $30 million, $35 million that you save from Jared Goff's supposed extension to what you're going to be paying Hendon Hooker as a 3rd-round pick, can be invested in any other position in the roster. Edge rusher, offensive line, filling whatever the perceived holes that you and I spoke about earlier in the show. And he's 5 points less, 10 points less PFF grade. You're a better team for it. Also, he plays the game differently than Jared Goff.
He does, yeah.
So, like, that is the other thing that we haven't really talked about that, like, I think is absolutely essential, because Jared Goff lines up, takes the snap, runs play action, and either throws the ball or just hands the ball off, right?
Right.
A defense does not need to commit another defender to that particular type of player. You put Hendon Hooker out there, they have to at least respect the fact that he can run the ball. And now you at least have one less defender in
the only thing that I would push back on is the idea that if you take a quarterback that is 10, 15 points lower PFF quality, all the things that you kind of talked about, and put money elsewhere, that you're just going to be a better team. And what we just got done saying is you need to have an elite quarterback to win the game, to win consistently. It doesn't matter the rest of the team. I mean, it does, right? But because it's not just one person, there's 53 people on the team. But you literally just said that a quarterback like Goff can't beat a Mahomes or an Allen or a Burrow. Why would a quarterback that's playing worse than Goff magically be able to do it? And that's where I disagree. Like, you need to get at least the same, if not better. Otherwise, even if the rest of the team gets worse, or not worse, but like stays the same. Mm-hmm. I think that you still need to improve that.
So the answer then is So in my scenario, this is the only way that the team can continually add to and build the roster out.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, in like the scenario where the Lions extend Jared Goff to $40+ million a year, eats into their cap space, you degrade your ability to continue to do that. Right?
Sure.
Okay. So the ability to continue to get better at other places and build a longer Super Bowl window by adding in future draft picks or adding people in free agency to fill holes is you have to have cap space. Well, you just dedicated cap space to a quarterback that can't beat those players. So you might as well spend that money to build the rest of the roster while the search continues for a quarterback that can. There's nothing that
so
says
either way you're dragging it out.
Yes.
You either get worse at quarterback and better somewhere else, but knowing you're not going to be able to win, or you stick with a better quarterback that also can't win.
Right.
And either way, like neither of those are winning processes.
Right. I think one of them wins more than the other one, and that's why I
the better quarterback.
It. Huh?
I think the better quarterback will win more than the worst quarterback.
If that's the case, then Jared Goff should have won a lot more games in the NFL than he currently did, and the team that drafted him wouldn't have traded him.
Have you seen the number of wins he's had over the last 6 years? He's like 4th in the NFL. He's won a shit ton.
Okay.
So,
do you still want Jared Goff as the quarterback of your team? The answer is no, right?
No, I'd rather have Kirk Cousins, to be honest. Like
there you go.
In that same, like I think Kirk Cousins is actually very underrated when it comes to like.
But he's still not good enough to win.
I mean, the teams he's been on have not been good enough to win either.
Like I would say, in part because of the contract that he has demanded to be Kirk Cousins. The teams that win Super Bowls in the NFL have elite quarterback play. If you cannot spend money, like spending money on Jared Goff is like acknowledging that what the Giants just did with Daniel Jones was a smart move. It's like saying, oh, let's give Kirk Cousins another contract. Oh, let's find another mediocre quarterback in the NFL. Hey, Tua, let's pick up his 5th-year option. These quarterbacks aren't good enough to beat the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
Tua had an 81.9 grade, better than Geno Smith.
Awesome. You think he's good enough to win against Josh? You think you're going to win the division with Tua as your quarterback? I don't.
It's too early to tell. And for me, his injury, I think so. His injury history is the biggest problem.
He's going into year 4, is he not?
He is.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I look at back in 2009 when we drafted Stafford. We were an 0-16 team.
Mm-hmm.
You know what we weren't going to do for the next several years, regardless of how good Stafford was?
Win.
Make the playoffs. Right. Win a lot of games and make the playoffs. Is it because he was bad? No. We were an 0-16 team. And now, granted, the Dolphins weren't 0-16 bad, but they were draft number 1 overall bad.
Sure.
Right? So, I mean, like, yeah, he hasn't won with them. He's been hurt. Like I said, his biggest issue is injury history.
Sure.
That's why I wouldn't commit to him long term. But, for some of these other guys, like, sure, they haven't won immediately. Most of those times you're on a really crappy team. Trevor Lawrence is a good example. Was on just a horrendous team. It's going to be a couple years before we get to see like what can he truly do for a team. But yeah, like back to the point though, like I don't think Goff is our long-term answer.
I don't. I mean, like you and I during this last draft were like, draft Anthony Richardson. Why did we think that? Why did you think that?
Because it gives us a long-term answer,
right?
But I probably wouldn't have started him this year. I would have. I wouldn't have, only because he was a talent that was raw enough where he needed more mentoring and like learning and stuff. That was everything that I had read and heard about him. We have Goff on that. We can't get rid of Goff without just completely obliterating our cap this year anyway. So if we're going to have to keep him on the roster, Let him
Sure.
play a year. Let Richardson sit behind him, watch, learn, come in if there's an injury. I would have drafted Richardson to sit on the bench this year and take over after that.
Sure. Let's address what Brian just said. Was Stafford elite, or was it the LA Rams team were a good team? He still won a Super Bowl game. Why not Goff? Have you listened to the last 30 minutes of the show?
Yeah. Because Stafford was elite. Like, he has an elite arm. He
does have an elite arm.
He has it. And so that's one of the things that we talk about Goff, right? Like, well, what elite thing does he have? Does he have
Nothing.
the elite? Right. He's an elite pylon, right? He just,
Right.
But Stafford had an elite arm, has an elite arm.
He has the top 5 arm in the NFL right now.
Right. He has the kind of the leadership kind of intangibles, like those. If you talk to any of his former players, they're like, when he gets in the huddle with 2 minutes left and we're behind, and he says we're going to win this game, everybody in that huddle believes we're going to win this game. Half the time he was right at a higher rate than anybody in history. So, yeah, I think Stafford was elite, and the Rams were a good team. That's not an or statement. It's an and, right? Like,
but the reason
they were a damn good team.
The reason as to why not Goff is that he's just not as a talented quarterback as is required to win at the highest levels in this sport.
Does Jared Goff make the final drive throw against Tampa Bay, where he sees cover 0, sees Cooper Kupp go, and like immediately goes and throws a perfect on stride 40-yard dime for
he doesn't. He's never thrown a perfect ball. Like when we traded.
He's thrown some good balls. Don't say never, but yeah.
You can list them on one hand. Like when we traded Matthew Stafford and I watched that first season of Jared Goff throwing the ball, I'm like, I'm used to my fucking quarterback throwing a spiral. What the fuck is this?
Yeah.
That's why not Jared Goff.
Spiral. Yeah. But
he does not do anything elite. He does not make plays outside of structure. He is just a guy that happens to be really good at football, but in no special way.
Yeah.
And you cannot win in the NFL without some special trait. You cannot do it.
Goff has more turnovers than anybody else as a QB since he's come into the league. So disagree with that. Yeah, Stafford threw a lot of INTs. Even in their Super Bowl year, he threw 17 interceptions.
Yeah, and this is the same fucking argument as the Josh Allen argument last year, right? It was like, oh, Josh Allen led the league in interceptions last year. Sure, he had 3 times the number of big-time throws. Go to Jared Goff's stats. He has more turnover-worthy plays throwing the football
most in the league
than he does touchdowns.
Yeah.
It's completely reversed. The problem is that when Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or any Joe Burrow or these guys who throw a lot of picks, the difference is that they throw those picks because that's the exception to the stuff that they're actually doing to win you football games. Right. Thank you, Brian. So but that's not who Jared Goff is.
Yeah. And at least for Stafford, because I'm a Stafford fan, so I'm gonna back him up on that. Right? I know, right? Shocker. But like looking at what he did in that first year, he was only the second quarterback to go to a new team and win the Super Bowl in the first year with the new team.
The previous one was Tom Brady the previous year.
I was like, those are the only 2 times in history it's ever happened, and it was Tom Brady. Peyton Manning's my GOAT, but arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. Definitely the most successful quarterback of all time, right?
Yes.
And Stafford. And like when you look at that, and when you look at those number of interceptions and still see stats like he had an incredibly good passer rating. You know what takes into consideration INTs? Passer rating.
Right.
Now, granted, passer rating's garbage because you can throw every fucking pass into the ground and still get a 38.
Yeah.
Which is dumb. But like his PFF scores were also quite good. He was in all of the other, top 5, top 6 of all of the other categories as well, including big time throws. Yes, the answer is Stafford was elite. Goff was not. I don't think that Goff would have been able to win on that team for 2 reasons. Number one, I don't think he's strong at the he does not thrive under pressure. whereas Stafford rises to the occasion under pressure.
Yes.
And number two, when you look at where is Goff's strength, it is play action. You need a good offensive line. You need a good run game. Why did he do so much better this past year? We had a great offensive line and we had a good run game. In LA, he had a great offensive line. Well, he had a good offensive line, but Todd Gurley in the run game was the number one in the league that year. When Gurley gets hurt and he had injury issues the next several years, what happened to Goff? Right? He went down. He really relies on the play action. That's not what the Rams could do in 2021. Their offensive line was horrid. Their run game was like 28th in the NFL. That's not something that Goff is going to thrive in. So, no, I don't think Goff could have taken that team past the – well, they probably would have beaten the Cardinals. But I don't think they would have gotten past the second round. And certainly he wouldn't have been able to throw that no-looker and drive down in the Super Bowl to do a game-winning drive. That's just not I don't think that's where he is he thrives at.
And like Brian says, Goff doesn't take risks like Stafford. I think that's a problem. And
that's my biggest problem with Aaron Rodgers.
Right. So like, I don't mind if a quarterback takes some risks if there's some reason as to why he took that risk, right? So like with Matthew Stafford or quarterbacks like, Brett Favre is the ultimate example of this. Like there was never a pass that Brett Favre felt he couldn't make.
Yeah.
Because his arm was so good that he could put the ball wherever he wanted to. Didn't matter what the situation was, right? Now he was wrong.
He was wrong many times, more times
right?
than anybody else in history.
But one of the reasons why he's an all-time great quarterback is the fact
right a lot too.
Right. Is that exactly. Is that like he was able to have success in situations that other quarterbacks would not have thrown the pass at all. Yeah. And those quarterbacks are Jared Goff because he cannot do what Brett Favre or Matthew Stafford does with their arms, right?
Yeah.
He cannot do what Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen can do with his legs. He cannot throw on the run like a Patrick Mahomes. He cannot throw a deep ball like Joe Burrow. There's nothing about Jared Goff that's truly special. And so the Lions have had to manufacture his specialness to limit his ability to turn the ball over, right? Yeah. So, and that is the thing that took them from that horrendous start last season to an 8-10 end to the year, is that it was like, okay, we figured out what Jared is good at and what he is bad at. And we are just going to take away what he is bad at.
Yeah. Lean into the good.
Right, exactly. And so, like, I think there are lots of quarterbacks in this league that can throw 300-yard, 3-touchdown games and something else, right? But when you're up against it and there's 40 seconds left on the clock and the Lions just kicked a field goal to, tie it or take a 1-point lead on Thanksgiving, and you give the ball back to a quarterback like Josh Allen, and the first fucking play is like a 30 or 40-yard pass play to set them up. That is the difference in between what that quarterback can do for that team. No one is concerned in the same situation kicking the ball back to Jared Goff. And that's why the search has to continue. That's why you cannot pay that guy another dollar.
And when you look at that game also, do you know what would have made that not even matter? If he threw the ball on stride to Jameson Williams in the end zone instead of behind him, where the DB can knock it down and force it to kick a field goal instead of a touchdown.
Shark. Yep. But yeah, you're 100%
Shark. Yeah, you're right. Yep. 100%. So he throws that on stride. He recognizes the coverage on time, which he doesn't, which is why they kind of shrunk the playbook a little bit to make him quicker, short to mid throws, midfield throws for him. But like, he identifies it a little bit quicker and he can throw that ball with a little bit more zip and a little bit more on stride. That's a touchdown. And that long field goal doesn't do any good for Buffalo at the end of the game. They have to throw a Hail Mary, which you never know. Maybe it goes, maybe it doesn't. The way the Lions go, those fucking Hail Marys always kill us. But still, that wouldn't have mattered if he could have made that throw when it counted.
Exactly. And like, to me, that is why you need to continue a search for a quarterback that, in the situational Lions that you just described on Thanksgiving, he can throw off his back foot with a wrist flick and put the ball 50 yards downfield to where it needs to go, because that's the difference between winning that. Yeah. Yes, that's the difference between winning that game.
Yeah.
Everything that he did, ultimately leading up to that moment, got them to there, I suppose, but didn't matter because they ended up losing it to a player that could ultimately do those things. So, like, I don't think that Hendon Hooker is going to be Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, or any of those guys. Do I think that he could be a Jalen Hurts? Yeah, I do. But, like, you cannot stop the search for a top 5, top 6, 8, 7, 8 quarterback if you have a guy on the roster that's, like, in his best season, he's going to be a top 10.
His best season, he's going to be Kirk Cousins,
right? So, like, Jared Goff everyone agrees, like, Jared Goff had a really good season last year, right? But, like, he's still like 22nd ranked quarterback in the NFL per PFF on how he played.
Yeah. 20. Yeah.
20, and so, like, okay, all the stats, all the touchdowns, the 8 out of 10 streak or whatever you want to call that, all of that rolled up into a guy who was the 22nd best quarterback in the NFL by that metric. Right. So imagine if you have a guy that's 8th on that list on the same team. Now you're talking, let's win a playoff game for the first time in 31 years.
That would be Tua that's 8th on that list, by the way.
Oh, God.
Although if you would have said 9, I could have said, well, that's either Geno Smith or Kirk Cousins.
I mean, maybe it needs to be higher. I mean, maybe I need to go back and readjust because...
Do we need to go to 7? Because that's Andy Dalton, and 6 is Jacoby Brissett.
Who's 5th?
Lamar Jackson.
Okay. See, Herbert was 12. I like Lamar Jackson. I don't have any problem with Lamar Jackson.
I'd like to see how this next season goes.
Sure.
I don't know.
I mean,
I'm still not big sold on him yet. But
if you want to talk about a guy that has not had a ton of stuff like working with him alongside him,
yeah,
like Lamar Jackson has not.
Yeah. But I would definitely take any of the top 3: Burrow, Mahomes, Allen, and actually, I was surprised that Justin Herbert was so low. He was 12th.
I was too.
Yeah. So Jared Goff is at 20. Basically, the couple above, couple behind he is essentially Daniel Jones, Kenny Pickett, Ryan Tannehill at 17, 18, 19. He's Dak Prescott, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Justin Fields at 21, 22, 23. That's the cluster that he's in. It
feels accurate to me.
Mm-hmm. Mitchell Trubisky's at 16. I'd throw that in there too. I think that's yeah. All right, dude. It is almost 8:30.
So next week we are going to take a look at the same topic, but another year out. We're going to another year and then another 2 years out. So we're going to look at what do you do if the Lions need to re-sign Penei Sewell, re-sign, Aiden Hutchinson, and you have these massive looming contracts on this record.
Yep.
On this roster.
We'll also take a look at a little bit on the dead cap hit. Like what are different teams doing? Where do we fall in that group? What are the successful teams doing compared to the less successful? Is there any consistency there? So that'll be an interesting one too, to figure out where we fall on that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're nerds, and dead cap is just as important as actual cap.
That's true. So. All right. So if you have any questions, comments, please like, comment, and subscribe. You can email us at casualgmpodcast@gmail.com. We're also at casualgm1 on Twitter for now. And we are continuing to get closer to our rebranding. So should be here before too long.
That'll be fun. I like it.
Yeah. So, all right, Mike.
All right, my friends. Thanks for joining the chat. Good as always, and good seeing your face, Drew.
Thanks. You too, Mike.
And that beard, like I just can't do anything. That beard is just intimidating.
Yeah, I know.
So, all right, buddy. Have a good one.
You too, buddy.
Yeah.